Greetings to you all. Welcome to the Somali Cultural Responsiveness Training. My name is Shukri Olo with the Schools and Community Partnerships Division at Seattle Public Schools.
My name is Muhammad Ali Roble, School and Family Partnership Liaison, and I work at Seattle Public School for several years. I'm really very happy to work with Shukri, and I'm welcoming to this training.
This training is brought to you by the grant that we're facilitating at Seattle Public Schools called Deep Dive 3. It's in partnership with Seattle Public Schools and the Seattle Housing Authority, and it's focused on reducing chronic absenteeism and discipline for African and African American students who attend 5 schools in the southeast of Seattle and live in the community called New Holly. The 5 schools are Wing Luke, Dunlap, Van Asselt, Aki, and Rainier Beach. We provided the Somali Cultural Responsiveness Training to all 5 schools, as well as 10 hours of additional coaching to be able to continue the learning for the schools. And we wanted to make this recording and have it be accessible to the other 92 schools in the district so that our schools and school staff can learn about the Somali culture, the variations within the culture, as well as the sort of the things that exist between culture and religion. And so welcome. We're going to go through our learning objectives. This isn't a research-based training. It's based on our experiences being Somalis and some of the things that we have witnessed working for the Seattle Public Schools. So we have 3 main learning objectives. The first is to understand the cultural background of Somali students and their families that are served by Seattle Public Schools, to improve communication and better engage Somali students and their families, and to understand and apply culturally relevant practices when serving Somali families.
So I have a question, and my question I would like to ask you, the trainee, is what are the few things that you know about Somalia or people from Somalia? Somalia is located on the Horn of Africa. It has the largest coastal area in Africa. It's from Red Sea and Gulf of Aden and Indian Ocean. Somalia is a small country. It has population about 12 million people. Somalis are preferred to eat mostly, even though that we have the largest coastal area, most of the people, they prefer to eat camel, goat, sheep, and really most of the time they didn't eat a lot of fish and seafood. Somalis are, majority of them, most of them, they are Sunni Muslim. Traditionally, in Somali culture, before even European they come, we have culture, we can make all our materials, and our food, we produce a lot of food, mostly they are corn, maize, and beans. And really, Somali, mostly they are nomadic people. Mostly they eat, meat and camel. But the farmers, they eat also vegetarians. And the Somali, they make their own materials. They make their houses. They make their utility. In Somalia, in food influenced by the European. When European they come, but also influenced by other countries. So for example, we live in East Africa. We use a lot of food like, in sambusa, mandes, they come from Africa, but also we use other traditional food come from Italy, spaghetti, and the other food also.
Next, we're going to do an activity called Relating to Experiences activity. At your tables, we want you to respond to 2 questions, and it might be personal, so you're more than welcome to pair up with 1 person or 2. The first question is, what is an experience that you've had in losing someone or something? And what was one thing that supported you after the loss? Next.
And so the history of Somalia, we cannot finish it with 1 hour, but I would like to give you a summary. Somali history is started even before the Yoruba, early civilization. The Somali, they call it Puntland, and they have relation with Asian, such as India, China, Persian, and also they have relation with trade with Arabs and also Egyptians and the other African. Somali, during the partition of Africa, Somalia was divided into 5, and each part was colonized by different countries. Somalia got independence in in 60, and they become, civil government, and we have like 4 years election and democrat and constitution. In 1969, the military took the power and led by the Mohammed Siad Barre, and we have a military coup from 1969 until 1991. 91, we have the civil war. Until the civil war, we didn't have really stable government. A lot of Somalis, they move from Somalia to the neighborhood countries, and you can see a lot of Somalis, they're scattered all around the world.
Which is why we wanted you to do the Relating to Experiences activity, because as Mr. Roble mentioned, in 1991, Somalia experienced one of the most difficult civil wars that I think we can recall in our generation, causing millions of people to become refugees internally, but also fleeing the country to neighboring countries like Kenya. Currently, there are 500,000 Somalis who are living in Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya, more than 200,000 in Kakuma, and many have resettled in this country, but also in the diaspora in the West specifically. And what that sort of background and experience, many of us haven't had the opportunity to reflect and process the levels of trauma that we've endured. But as human beings, we've all experienced difficult moments in our lives. And so we wanted to humanize the struggle of Somalis, but also show that we all go through something, regardless of our backgrounds. So next, we're going to talk about between faith and school. Somali culture is deeply embedded in the Islamic faith. We used to say back in the day that 99.9% of Somalis are Muslim, but right now I don't think we know what that data looks like, but a large percentage we can assume are still practicing the Islamic faith. And because of that, we encourage teachers to have the fasting Ramadan calendar posted. Ramadan fasting is one of the pillars of Islam, one of the 5, and we celebrate for the entire month Ramadan, and we encourage teachers to post a calendar in their classrooms. Also, we encourage teachers to engage families whose children are struggling with fasting. In Islam, a child isn't obligated to fast until he or she reaches the age of 15 or puberty, whichever comes first. But there are a lot of Somali families who are having their children start younger so that their children adapt and learn at a very young age. And sometimes what that means is that a child who's maybe 10 years old is struggling and is dehydrated or really tired or might faint. And if that happens and you're noticing that as an educator, we encourage that you reach out directly to the family and let them know what's going on. Also, we believe it's important to engage children in their full identity, including their obligation or interest in praying. Again, it's not mandatory until they're 15 or puberty, whichever comes first, but a lot of children are praying in our schools. And there are 2 prayers that hit the time that the children are in school. And so what that means is that a child needs to go do ablution, which is the cleansing before the actual prayer, which takes about 10 minutes. And because of that, we encourage that a staff person and an adult is supervising the child so that they're not just, saying they're going to go pray and they may be roaming the hallways or something like that. Also, we think it's important to have a prayer schedule posted in the classroom just as for your information for school staff so that you know the exact time that a child is supposed to go pray if he or she is interested in praying. Lastly, we encourage teachers and educators to consider acknowledging holidays like Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. Muslim students, when celebrating both holidays, will be missing a time from school, most likely Eid al-Adha for 1 day and Eid al-Fitr for 3 days. And so just like other holidays are acknowledged, like Christmas and Hanukkah, etc., we think it's important to acknowledge students in their full identity, including the holidays that they celebrate. So next, we're going to do an activity on a poetry activity. Somalia is known as the nation of poets. We have many, many poets dating back generations, poets like Hadrawi, We have currently one of the best poets by the name of Warsan Shire, who is based in the United Kingdom, whose album was featured in Beyonce's Lemonade album, or her poetry actually was mentioned in Beyonce's Lemonade album, which to many of us younger Somalis, that's when we sort of knew that we made it, when Beyonce featured us in her album. And then you have artists like K9, who is a rapper, but also a poet out of Canada. And so poetry, because we're an oral society, is one of the ways that we express ourselves. And so we wanted to do this activity. So at your tables, you'll have a sheet. One starts with a proverb and a poem by Hadrawi, Muhammad Ibrahim Warsame Hadrawi. And so at your table, the first proverb is called Barashohorted Haini'in, which is about bias, and it directly translates to don't judge me before you get to know me. And the second poem is about the Somali language and the importance of knowing one's identity through being able to speak your own language. And so we want you to think about the ways that you can incorporate either the proverb or the poem in your classrooms. And so, for example, if you're an arts teacher, how would you incorporate that? If you're an ELL teacher, how would you incorporate that? As well as your handout will have a link to other poems and proverbs that you can use, so you're not limited to just those two. But how would you use the proverb or the poem to encourage children's full identity in your classrooms? So next slide, we're going to talk about education. The civil war in Somalia has completely decimated the educational system. Before the war, the educational system was very similar to that of the US, though the curriculum was much more advanced. Before the war, there were both public and private schools, but now only private schools are available for those who can afford it, which means a lot of children don't end up going to school. And college or higher education can be pursued after the age of 17 if affordable. Prior to the war, higher education in Somalia was free. In our culture, there is an intersection of culture and education. Teachers have high status in the Somali culture and are highly respected. Children are expected to listen to their teachers, their elders, and don't make eye contact. And this certainly impacts classroom participation and openness to share what's happening in a child's life, because the teacher is seen as a parent, as an elder.
Names. Somali names have consist of three parts. The first name is the child's name, individual. The second name is father's name. And the third name is grandfather's name. And Somalis, they didn't change the names fathers and grandfathers. The siblings, the male and female, they are using the same second name and last names. And when it comes to Somali women, when they got married, they didn't change their names. They keep their father's name and grandfather's name. And by the keeping the names of the father and grandfathers have very important in the Somali culture and society. It maintains the appreciation of their clan of birth. Last names, many of them, they have meaning. For example, my last name is Roble, which meaning my dad was born, my grandfather was born during rain season. And Shukri, your father, his name is?
Olo.
Which means?
My last name is Olo, which means Ol, which means my grandfather was born probably in a time of conflict.
And cultural and knowledge for the Somali. Most of the Somali women, they express their feeling by touching, hugging, and kissing on the cheek. And then mostly the Somali, when you go visit the Somali houses, they like to, hospitality. They need to welcome to you. You need to take off your shoes. And also sometimes the family, when you visit them, they will give you tea or drink, and they didn't ask you. And the way we communicate with the Somali, as Shukri mentioned it, we come from social, oral society. The people, the communication, best thing to communicate with the Somali families and the students is orally. And mostly, the other thing also, when you're giving the Somali food, is best is to select the halal meat. And the different time, many Somalis really, parents particularly, when you have, organizing the meeting or parent teachers conference, the timing sometimes is very hard for them. And also, we teach the families in the students in the house to respect when they didn't have a lot of eye contact. Most of the time, we tell them our children to look down and for our respect. And many times, sometimes the teachers, they didn't understand. Many Somali children, we didn't teach them to ask questions. Because when they ask questions, the parents, they say, no, you not ask. And so they grow up in that way. The way to respect the Somalis is, firstly, we don't want to serve food that contains pork, or we are not really provide alcohol, even they didn't allow to sit down with where they're serving the alcohol. Avoid also to talk with the Somali family students, they are praying. We don't need to intervene. The other thing also, we're considering very bad when you finger point the person, it's a respect. And also, when you shake hands with a different gender, it is more appropriate if the person started and you can shake hands. The last thing also is, I'm requesting the staff or the school, we have Ramadan we are fasting, and it's not appropriate to be having the events at night time.
If you are requesting that Somali or Muslim families attend meetings or events in the evening, keep in mind that people are fasting from sunrise to sunset, and so another month would be more appropriate.
And in the state of Washington, Somalis, they're living, most of them, they estimate from 50 to 60 in Washington state. Mostly they're living in Seattle, Tukwila, Renton, and Kent. And really, Somali, they have largest number in Seattle Public School. And when you compare in bilingual, it's a second language who speak Somali language in our Department of ELL.
So next slide, we're going to talk about Somali families and the pressures that they face in the U.S. One of the challenges is that war disrupted our cultural fabric since the 1980s. With the 91 war beginning in 1988. There are more single-parent headed households in the U.S. due to conflict, refugee camp, trauma, and the pressures of immigrating to a foreign land. And when we were designing this training, the two of us had a robust conversation about why there is a sort of a large percentage of Somali women who are single-parenting. And that includes the things that we mentioned, but also when you arrive to a new country and you don't know the language and you don't have the education or the background or the networks to be able to rebuild your life, I think that can take a toll on a family, causing pressures and disrupting the fabric of that unit. But like many cultures, Somalia is a very patriarchal society where women, just like in this country, for example, we aren't paid equally as that of men. I think it's 77 cents per $1 that men make. But Somalia, women don't have equal rights. And that's, I think, not just a country problem, but a worldwide issue. And so when Somali women come to this country, they suddenly realize that they have all of these freedoms that weren't necessarily accessible to them back in their home country. And some of them might have been DV victims, have experienced some struggles within their marriage, and decided that they've had enough and they could rebuild their life with their children alone. And this, communication and cultural gaps in the family. When you have children who are able to speak the language and the parents who do not, that can often create a power struggle within a family and sort of a communication gap between parents and the children. And that certainly, I think, is an immigrant struggle that impacts a lot of different immigrant families, but one that we've also experienced as well. Being multi-cultural, having multiple identities can also be an issue, especially suspicion and fear post 9/11. As Somalis, as Black Muslims, we have struggled, just like other Muslims in this country, with being afraid of what's going to happen, and what are people going to think about us, and just constantly having this suspicion, fear in our minds. And poverty also. We came to this country with nothing, and we're starting rebuilding our lives with nothing. And so many Somalis live in public housing and are, trying to better themselves. And poverty doesn't seem to be generational at this point. We have many who grew up in public housing, but also whose children pursued higher education and have moved on, but that certainly still exists. So next, we're going to talk about some of the ways that Somalis manage the challenges that I mentioned. One way that we manage challenges is called ayuto, which is sort of a saving system to avoid interest and make purchases. Interest, as in Islam, is forbidden because you end up paying double the price of the thing that you bought, whether it's a house or a car or whatever it is that you're purchasing. And so Somalis have come up with a very creative way to help build each other. And women actually started this. It's called ayuto, which is a saving system. So for example, a group of women, about 10 of them, will get together, and every month they decide to save $100 or $500, whatever the amount. And then 1 month, one person collects that amount. So $500 times 10, one person collects, and then the next month another person collects, and then the next month, until everyone has gotten a turn. And then maybe it's $5,000, maybe $10,000, and then you can use that money on a car purchase or a down payment on a house or whatever it is that you're trying to buy, thus avoiding interest. So that's one way. There's a money collection system when someone is in need called qaran in our culture. Because we're a tribal society, we are very tight-knit. There isn't an individualistic kind of society. And so the qaran is money that is provided to a family, a person, anybody who could be of the same tribe but also happens to be Somali when that person is in need. For example, if someone is in a car accident and is in the hospital, or someone's child has been afflicted by something or whatever that is, a group of Somalis or the tribe of that family will collect 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, whatever, and that's free money that goes to the family to support them in their struggle. We have a strong tribal family connections, which I think exhibit, the qaran is an example of that. Somalis have a value around being a collective society versus individualistic. And then lastly, the hawala system, supporting families back home. Hawala is the remittances that we Somalis in the diaspora, not just in the United States, send money back home to support our families who might be struggling with poverty. And so billions of dollars are sent to Somalia to support women and children who are in need. And about 2 years ago, the United States government put a halt on remittances that were going to Somalia because of alleged ties that the funds were being, misallocated or going to different groups. And so, it's harder now to send money back home. People are having to go through different routes, which then means that the money gets to the family late and not necessarily when they need it. So next, we're going to talk about the dynamics between African Americans and Africans. And I grew up in this country, as I mentioned. I grew up in public housing, and this is very personal to me, but I'll give you sort of my take and my understanding on the dynamics that exist between Africans and African Americans. I'll give you a brief sort of history. Somalia is on the coast of East Africa, And we are a very prideful society. We take pride in not being enslaved, and that I don't think has anything necessarily to do with our will or our ability to fight back those who were at the time enslaving people in West Africa. But it just turns out that they just didn't make it to the east of Africa. And so we take a lot of pride in not being enslaved. We had trade with Arab traders who visited all of Africa, including West, and would come back to the land of Punt at the time, which is now known as Somalia, and tell us that we look different, that we are different than the people that they've seen in West Africa. And that difference also meant that we looked a lot like them. And so I think we took a lot of pride in having that connection to the Arabs that were visiting our land through trade. And then we didn't have exposure currently when post-91 Civil War, we didn't have exposure to the African American community. Many of us grew up in refugee camps like myself, only staying in a place full of hundreds of thousands of people who spoke your language and looked just like you. And then we arrived in this country as newly arrived refugees in the 90s, and then we were told things about African Americans. And the things that we were told about African Americans coming here as newly arrived refugees who have never seen people that share the same skin color as us but have different history weren't necessarily positive. And the things that we often saw in the media or maybe saw in real life, maybe different scenarios that we witnessed, sort of reinforced the things that we were being told about African Americans. And so let's go to the other side in thinking about African Americans. The images that African Americans have of Africans aren't necessarily positive either. You see images of starving children in Ethiopia. You see images of different rebel groups fighting in the Congo. You see images of AIDS victims in South Africa. The images, the lion hunter in Kenya, you don't necessarily see the beautiful coast of Somalia or, the beaches of Zanzibar or the coast of, Mombasa. You don't see any of that. You don't see the people that are thriving in these communities. You often just see the stereotypes, and those stereotypes often goes both ways. And then you have a system that wasn't necessarily made by us or for us, and that sometimes continues to kind of pit groups against each other, creating an environment where there's a sense of scarcity of resources, for example, in housing, in education, in accessing services. And so there's this constant tension, of both sides thinking, these people came to this country and they're taking my housing, or these people did this and they're doing this. And those stereotypes are going both ways. And so when you notice that happening in your schools, I see it every day working in our schools, especially in the Southeast. Those dynamics exist, and then when you add the layer of religion and the sort of national rhetoric now that we're hearing about Muslims, it sort of compounds the issue. And so when you notice that, we encourage that you do focus groups with your students and encourage dialogue so that we can get to the root of what the issue is, and that students are able to better communicate about what each person is hearing. Beyond the things that they're seeing, beyond the stereotypes that they're repeating, what is the root, and how do we, as Pan-Africans, and ultimately all of us are African, including all of human beings. We all came from the continent of Africa at some point. We encourage dialogue and to not let the issue go when you witness that in your classrooms or in your schools. And so with this segment, I'll end with a quote by Nelson Mandela, who says, "I dream of an Africa which is in peace with itself." And that includes both diasporan Africans and native-born Africans, and ultimately all of us as human beings, because we all came from that continent. Next.
And current challenges in education. an ELL department or ELL service English language learners. Service is a very good program that helps the student to achieve academic performance, particularly reading, writing, and social skills and science. And it's very necessary that you explain the parents what is the special, what is the ELL department. The other thing also we have challenge is special education. In back home, it's not available, special education in Somalia. So many parents, they didn't understand what special education is. So we as staff, we have responsibility to outreach and explain with them, what we have serving, what service we are providing. And also sometimes the family, they didn't understand. It's nice to explain what is the service they are providing. The other thing also we have, in Flash program, a lot of families, they are rejecting, but they didn't understand. This Flash program is a program that helping the children, how they grow up, what is the changing is, and we are not teaching how, bad things like the students. So the parents, they have right to sign, but they need to go on programs. And family engagement, really, when it comes to family engagement, in back home, we are not involved in education, and always we think that the teacher responsibility, everything. But in here it is different. And I see when it comes to family engagement, 90% the family engagement doing by the mothers. I really appreciate Somali mothers because they are the who involved, who come to school, who helping their kids. And really we need more fathers also to involve the kids. And when it comes to music, artists, it's a program that helping the kids to learn. It's not something that we are teaching bad things, not like rape, classic music. No, we are not teaching that one. Every music and artist is related to the program and learning.
Yeah, and so I think for the music and arts program, oftentimes parents are afraid that the kids might be learning rap music or music that has profanity in it, which is considered music is sort of a big taboo in our culture, and some believe that it's forbidden in Islam. And so, but sort of a way to manage that would be to have parents actually see what happens in music and arts class, to bring them in so that they're learning about what was the example that you used? You brought a group of parents into the classroom and then...
No, also one of the schools, Dearborn, a lot of parents, they started learning the music and artists. The parents, they say, I invited them, five mothers, they go to the classroom, and I asked the teacher, can you explain what you're teaching? And he shows the music, and the music says A, B, C, D, E, F, with the music. And then they realize that the music they think and the music they're teaching are different. And that is and also that time after they realize the music that we are teaching in the classroom is appropriate and it's related to their learning, and then they accept it and they sign the documents.
Exactly. So it's about exposure. It's about making sure that families have access to the classrooms and that they can see for themselves. Word of mouth is the way that we communicate. And so one person might spread sort of misinformation and that gets to the entire community, which could be helpful sometimes, but then in other ways not so. And so as much as you can, try to expose Somali families, whether it's the Flash program, whether it's ELL program, whether it's special education, whatever the program is, bring parents in and let them see for themselves. So next, we're going to talk about best practices in working with Somali families. The first is to have high expectations for Somali children, and all children. As educators, we should have high expectations for all children, and to plan special events and recreational opportunities and work together with the Somali community to support our children's education. Face-to-face communication, home visits are certainly better alternatives to connecting with Somali families. Ask for, receive, and act on feedback from parents and families. There's a saying in Somali about your word and how important your word is. And so if you go to a home visit and you tell a family you're going to do this and this, and then you don't follow up or follow through on that commitment, then that sort of trust that you're building with that family doesn't always happen because you didn't follow through. Lastly, engage directly with parents and build trust and relationships. As much as you can, try to do that face-to-face. And then best practices continued. we think it's important to value home culture and home language at school. An example is through the grant that we're working on, Deep Dive 3, we've been able to not just bring a training about Somali culture and responsiveness, but also a Somali language class that is happening at Wing Luke, for example. The leadership there has been amazing and was open to having children's language capacity, be continued to build right in their school. And so Mr. Roble is one of the instructors in that class. There's about how many students?
We have almost like 35. We started with the 15 at the beginning, and now we got like almost, we have waiting list of the teacher, and really they done very nice job. And the family, when they send the kids really, they're very happy, they're learning their own language. And we asked them at the beginning, and really the principal and Abdurrashid Hagali and vice principal, they helped us, and we done very nice job. And they're requesting now to do next year 2 classes. One is the elementary school, one is a beginner, and the other one will be intermediate. And it's a good result. And really, it's helping a lot. Also, when we teach the class, also the parents, they say, we want to learn Somali language also.
Yes, and so there are things like that. Poetry activity, having the proverbs posted up in your schools or in your classrooms, and seeing what does that do to a child who sees his identity, his language, what does that do to their sense of belonging in our schools and in our classrooms? It does a lot. And so that's one example. Also provide opportunities for children to strengthen their cultural identity in the classroom. We already talked about that. Invite parents to visit classrooms to observe teaching and learning so that they could see what's happening, but also have access to information, the appropriate information, the correct information. Involve parents in making important decisions in schools, and this is specifically around intervention supports or ELL supports or special education. We think it's important to do early intervention and have those kinds of conversations with our families. Collaborate with parents as equal partners in educating our children. And lastly, proactively communicate with parents about children's positive behavior and positive academic progress. Oftentimes when a parent sees the district phone number calling them, I think the fear is that, what did my student do now? And it's always the negative. And so we think it's important to not just call when something wrong happens, but also call when that child makes a progress in something, or behavior shifts, or you notice that child acting differently. As a parent ourselves, we'd love to have that sort of reinforcement that our child isn't always causing problems. And so that concludes our training. You'll have access to the handout that has additional information about the cultural norms, the list of poetry activities and different activities, a values-based protocol when you're having a meeting with a Somali family. And we hope that you're able to access this training and find it valuable. Thank you so much.